Derek, thank you very much for your very thoughtful comments. It reminds us of our history and tradition, and thank you for sharing the thoughts about your mom who has passed away. In our culture, when somebody passes away, we say shukr, and I say that to you today. And it means may their spirit and their soul rest in eternal peace. Your comments about your mom have really helped to ground our day today. I think her message and her legacy of love and kindness and humility will ground our conversations today for the next 2 days, and we will carry her spirit with us. Thank you again. Are we ready for Okanagan? There he is. Okay, hello. All right. Good morning to all of you who are joining in person from UBC Okanagan in Kelowna, and all of you who are joining online. My name is Naz Virji-Babul, and I will be co-hosting this event today with Devin Harris, who is our Director of Health Systems at UBC. Devin and I both started our positions early this year, and this is the first time we're co-hosting an event, and they decided to structure this in 2 different places and online, so this is going to be a lot of fun. In addition to his position as Director of Health Systems, Devin is also a clinical professor in the Department of Emergency Medicine at UBC. He holds the position of Council Chair at Health Equality BC and is an Executive Medical Director in Interior Health. Clinically, he has practiced emergency medicine since 2001 in multiple departments in British Columbia and has held leadership roles within Interior Health, the Provincial Health Services Authority, Vancouver Coastal Health, and Providence Healthcare. As the Director of Health Systems, Devin works closely with our Assistant Director of Health Systems, Ben Fair, who you've heard mentioned many times already, and the entire UBC Health team to connect organizations, people, and the public. Over to you, Devin, to introduce me. Let's see how this works.
Thanks, Naz. And so far, so good on the technology. And hearing the latter part of your comments and opening, it did really sound heartfelt. So thank you for that, and thank you to UBC in Vancouver. So it gives me a great honor to introduce Naz. Dr. Nazneen Virji-Babul is the Director of Interdisciplinary Research, UBC Health. Along with that, she's a physical therapist, neuroscientist, and associate professor in the Department of Physical Therapy at UBC's Faculty of Medicine. As the Director of Interdisciplinary Research at UBC Health, she leads efforts to advance interdisciplinary health research collaborations, supports implementation science, and contributes to building a learning health system. Dr. Virji-Babul works closely with researchers, university units, and health and community partners to address complex societal health challenges using a holistic approach. She is deeply committed to fostering equitable relationships, embracing diverse perspectives, and promoting innovative collaborative practices across UBC's Vancouver and Okanagan campuses. And as you can see, she's a fantastic individual and a very caring person as well. Back to you, Naz.
Thank you very much, Devin. This gathering represents a unique opportunity for dialogue, one that brings together patients, community members, care providers, academics, nonprofit organizations, healthcare administrators, and policymakers. Our goal today is to move beyond discussion. We aim to forge connections that put knowledge into practice and drive real health improvements across British Columbia. This is not just interdisciplinary work where expertise from different fields are integrated, but truly an opportunity for transdisciplinary work, where boundaries can be transcended and new ways of thinking and problem solving can emerge through collective dialogue and collaboration. At UBC Health, we are proud to host this event. Dialogue is core to our mission of connecting people, ideas, and actions to advance health outcomes, equity, and health systems. But we know that dialogue alone is not enough. Today, I encourage each of you not just to engage in meaningful conversations, but also to think deeply about how these insights can inspire collaborative, evidence-informed action. It is through these connections that we can transform dialogue into tangible, positive, and equitable change. We are all witnessing extraordinary shifts in our life, not just in health, but in multiple areas that intersect with health, here in BC, but also nationally and internationally. These challenges call for a rethinking of how we approach and innovate the future of healthcare and healthcare delivery. BC's priorities in transdisciplinary health education, interdisciplinary health research, and the emerging inevitable trends in artificial intelligence and digital health will no doubt transform our healthcare system. But there are many, many questions that will arise due to these new opportunities and challenges. I hope that you will take full advantage to mobilize knowledge, collaborate across sectors, and think creatively about how we can address pressing health education and research priorities related to climate change, population aging, human resource challenges, Indigenous-led health research, substance use, and mental health, just to name a few. Let us honor the collective wisdom in these rooms with a shared commitment for equitable healthcare that will address the needs of all of the many diverse and intersecting communities in BC. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to the conversations. I'll now turn it back over to Devin for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Naz. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional unceded territories of Okanagan Silk, where we are today, and thank Elder Rose and Elder Kathy for opening our day in a good way. And if those of you in Vancouver could see where we are, you would be incredibly impressed with the beauty of the lands in which we are here today as well. I want to thank all of you in the room as well for taking time out of your busy work and jobs and coming here to listen, to learn, to collaborate, and to dialogue, and to come to solutions within healthcare. I want to acknowledge those in Vancouver also, and I want to acknowledge the ability for technology to put us all together to do this as well. In following up with what Naz is saying, I think there's no question that there are a lot of challenges within the health system right now. Considerations around the workforce, considerations around care delivery, access, change in demography and aging, inequities that have been rooted for a long period of time that are now being sustained. A lot of this work that we now need to undertake, and we haven't tackled or been able to tackle them. In addition with that, we have had a toxic drug crisis that has continued and that needs to be addressed in ways that we all can have collective efforts to move on it. From a societal perspective, we realize that the health of the planet determines the health of societies. And so that also is part of our collective efforts, which is more broad outside healthcare. In addition to that, the recognition of polarization. So when we talk about and look at what's going on societally and within healthcare, the differences in viewpoints and the separation and consideration of viewpoints, dialogue that isn't quite as constructive, or the pieces or thoughts that keep us apart from humans and from connectivity and from our relational work that we really need to do, have now been embedded within society and continue to further. Along with polarization is the rise of misinformation and trust. Trust in you as scientists, as clinicians, as educators, trust in what you say, trust in what you research, trust in your shared agreements, and trust in your ability and to provide care and where people will seek care, amongst them your friends, relatives, colleagues, families, and others. So on the greater scheme of things, that's what today is about. It's bridging those polarization of views, of viewpoints, bridging organizations and people, bringing together educators, clinicians, and researchers into a room with community, with elders, with leaders to understand what our priorities are for care. And so from that, I'm very inspired that technology can enable us to do that, but in a way that we all come together to move forward. We'll identify our assets and strengths, our community-based assets and strengths, and look at things not from a deficit perspective, but one in which we lift up those pieces that are really, really done well and scale and spread them to inform the rest. And so that's what I'm really looking forward to as well. If you give me a few minutes, I'm going to comment on some housekeeping. As you've noticed, this is tech-enabled, so have grace and patience with us as we move through things during the day, but so far I'll keep my fingers crossed, so thank you. The program itself will have interactive sessions throughout, featuring conversations, perspectives among inspiring leaders who helped put important knowledge into use. Our opening plenary involves Christopher Horsethief, Duane Jackson, and Gabrielle Legault in conversation about bringing Indigenous knowledge into action. We'll close today with proceedings and a conversation starting just after 3 with Linda Lee, Cheryl Mitchell, Kevin Samra, Angela Wignall, and Ove Young, panelists from across the health ecosystem, patients, providers, researchers, and policymakers. And they'll discuss key takeaways, promising practices, and forward-looking strategies to support the movement from research to action in BC. I want to thank the planning team, the event team, and volunteers, broadly all partners and collaborators, patient community members, and our Indigenous elders and partners as well. Suffice to say that the moment of thanks doesn't go into the amount of time and effort that people have put in. We will be recording the plenary panels and other sessions in the main event room, so in the Great Hall where you are in Vancouver, and here at the gathering in Kelowna, which will be shared on UBC Health's YouTube channel after the event. We will not record any of the other proceedings. If you are in person and would like to remain off camera, there are some tables designated that are out of frame. Today also, you'll be invited to use Slido to suggest questions and comments, upvote the ones you want most, engage with other participants, and provide feedback. We've structured the sessions on Slido into distinct rooms, each corresponding to specific segments of the agenda, which will be shared throughout the day. To engage with the session, simply select the room from the options in Slido. You can do that on your laptop or smartphone, or if you go to the Slido link on the screen, or click the link that appears when you view the QR code through your phone's camera. You can also use Slido to communicate any challenges, issues, or needs privately with the event team. Just a reminder to keep your comments respectful and constructive as it's open to all. Aside from Slido, we would like your feedback. There'll be opportunities to provide feedback on sessions and overall event experience, and we greatly appreciate it as it will inform future planning efforts as well. There are accessible washrooms at both sites. Please follow the signage and ask any of our staff members for directions if needed. If you need assistance or have specific accessibility needs, please also ask event team members who are found in the back and at the desk as well. Please approach our volunteers for any questions or support. And as noted, there'll be scheduled breaks and meals throughout the day. Feel free to contact our online team members who can be identified by the event table labeled in their Zoom name, and they will be happy to help. So the work that you've done in this event has attracted the attention of our Minister of Health. And so I would just like to transition to that, please, recording. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I am Josie Osborne. I'm BC's Minister of Health, and I'm honored to be speaking to you today from the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, known today as the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. I wish that I could be there with you in person, but I can't. So I want to say thank you to Dr. Devin Harris and UBC Health and the event organizers. Thank you, everybody, for welcoming me into this unique event, Bridging Research into Action. Our government recognizes and appreciates the importance of health research. It is absolutely critically important to a very strong and resilient health system, a healthy population, and a growing economy too. And BC being home to over 2,500 health researchers who work in clinical research and health services and policy research, population and public health research, it's incredible. And we are all aware that research holds the potential to transform healthcare to better serve patients, whether by uncovering new treatments or identifying systemic challenges that we face, or informing the development of more equitable and more efficient policies and programs. But we also know research alone is not enough. And the value of research really lies in how we use it, how we translate evidence to inform policy and planning, service design, clinical decisions, and that this translation is not always straightforward. It requires good dialogue, ongoing, open, and inclusive dialogue between researchers, policymakers, healthcare providers, patients, and communities, and that Each of these partners brings a very unique and important perspective that's critical to shaping strategies that are grounded in real-world experience that address the complexities of our health systems. It's through these kinds of conversations where we can prioritize the most urgent healthcare challenges we face, we can adapt research findings to fit local realities, and we can anticipate some of the barriers that we might see in implementation. Additionally, the importance of innovation can never be overstated. Generating innovation drives progress, it drives competitiveness and long-term sustainability across sectors. And I know you're well aware that we are facing compounding pressures. They demand innovative approaches and solutions. So, for example, in healthcare, we are facing health human resource shortages. We have a growing and aging population and increasing rates of chronic diseases. We have the impacts of climate change that we're all facing as well. So that's why it's more important than ever for us to be able to leverage innovation, to be able to generate new opportunities, ones that really will strengthen our healthcare system. And that's exactly what we're doing. In 2023, JEDI, the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation, and the Ministry of Health together announced BC's life sciences strategy to position the province as a global hub for life sciences and biomanufacturing. I know you're well aware of it, but 2 of the 5 pillars of this plan really center on expanding clinical trial capacity and leveraging and commercializing research capacity. So to this effect, we're investing $4.2 million to create a unit for phase 1 clinical trials at Mount St. Joseph Hospital in Vancouver. We're contributing $2.4 million to support the establishment of an endowed professorship in clinical pharmacology at UBC, a position which will work closely with the phase 1 clinical trials unit to accelerate the design and implementation of clinical trials. Additionally, in 2024, we provided almost $11 million towards the expansion of Triumph, our National Particle Accelerator Center, and we did this to include the new Institute for Advanced Medical Isotopes. It's all part of our 10-year cancer action plan. The Ministry of Health and health authorities are also working to streamline approvals processes for research within and across health authorities to make it easier to conduct health research. That includes behavioral research and also easier to attract clinical trials here to BC. We're so fortunate, we've got a rich and complex research environment. We perform world-class research. We recognize the importance of a strong health research ecosystem and investing in BC-based talent, research, and industry. So that's why our province has supported and funded the Michael Smith Health Research BC and Genome BC since 2001. These are organizations supporting BC-based researchers to grow and to thrive, which helps us attract and retain top-tier talent. And they also strengthen the pathway from research to commercialization, growing our life sciences industry and really benefiting our economy. It's working together, and by doing that, we've made some very important progress in health research and life sciences here in BC. Dialogue that fosters trust and mutual understanding is building bridges in the gap between research and policy, ensuring that decisions are informed not only by robust evidence, but also by practical wisdom. So thank you again, everyone there, to UBC Health and the event organizers. Thanks for inviting me to share some remarks. Thanks to you for participating and sharing your experience and knowledge. Your contributions are incredibly important and so appreciated. I'm thrilled to see everybody working together. That's the way we can ensure that the insights we gain through research translate into strategies that really, truly make a difference in the lives of British Columbians. So thank you. Thanks for having me virtually, and have a wonderful and productive couple of days. And I think I'm gonna be seeing you in not a 3D version, but at least a live virtual version tomorrow. See you then.
Thanks, Minister Osborne. And from clarification, we will be seeing her later today, actually, in a virtual manner, joining us live for an afternoon session at 2:05 on a collaborative efforts to improve suicide care in emergency departments within Interior Health. So from Kelowna, thank you. I will hand it back to you, Naz, for the opening plenary.
Great. This back and forth is working really well. All right. We're ready to start our first plenary session, and it is my honor to introduce Duane Jackson, who will moderate our first plenary session. Duane is from the Gitanmaax of the Gitxsan Nation. With a background in early childhood education, he has worked with Success by Six and Children First, as well as partnered with various early childhood and health initiatives in BC. He has been a member of UBC's Human Early Learning Partnerships Aboriginal Steering Committee for the past 15 years. Duane has been involved with the Patient Voices Network for 8 years, being involved in many initiatives related to patient quality improvement. He was a member of the technical committee that helped create the Cultural Safety and Humility Health Standard that is currently in BC hospitals. Duane is also focused on men's health. He's a founder of the Talk Gay Men's Program, which focuses on being a whole person. The idea is not to look at what it means to be a man within today's society, but rather to get an understanding of what it means to be a whole person. Please join me in welcoming Duane.
I can call them up as we go. Thank you. Amahikle, good morning. Waich, the wai, some wilts was some la ha, let's a whitwe, Gitxsan of a lot. My name is, it's Wiach. It's a little weird introducing myself that way now because I only just received that name on Saturday night. So it's Wiach. I am Gitxsan, which is fireweed of the Gitanmaax Nation of Old Hazelton. I am of the house of Horsethief. My brother Derek kind of flummoxed me this morning because the name I received was my mother's name. And the only thing I do for the time I have left with you in this place is to try and honor that name and carry it in the best way and carry it in the way that the last person carried it. And I have met no better person. So but there's no pressure, you know. It's like having people come up here and attempt to say, pronounce things in our languages. And I always tell people, I say, it's not getting it right that honors us. It's making the attempt. Because for 200 years, the attempt was not made. So I'm always really, thank you so much for that. When I got involved in early childhood, the only job I actually, my plan was to open a center, hopefully cater to single parents, studied early childhood, and people asked me, how do you get involved in early childhood education? I said, well, I coached men's basketball. It's almost the same thing. There's just a lot less negotiating now. There's a lot less negotiating now, and there's a lot less whining. I wish that was an exaggeration. So when I got involved in it, I went for this job with Success by Six as a regional Aboriginal coordinator, and being a very big believer in energy, that was actually the only job I applied for. I had my center all designed, but while I was being educated, I discovered advocacy, and I have yet to spend a single licensed hour on a childcare floor anywhere. This is what I've been doing for the last 18 years. Is bringing that understanding of the importance of early childhood development and the understanding of how Indigenous cultures approached it before first contact and the holistic way in how we raised our children. So I went around to the communities I was working with, and this is where the knowledge to action piece comes in. Because I went around to ask these communities I was working with what they needed, what they believed their children needed. And primarily across the board, the answer was not another gap analysis. Yeah. Because the gaps that they were looking to fill were not gaps within our culture as opposed to gaps within the current society. And that's not what we needed. We needed to return. We needed to come back to what we were. What we had been for 20,000 years instead of becoming what had only existed for, at that point, probably 50 to 100 years. Plus, this is once again the knowledge to action piece. most of the people in those communities said gap analysis happened, and then the people went away, I guess, to knowledge translate, and they never came back. So it became very evident quickly that it was mostly a make-work project. And if they didn't get the answers to the gaps that they wanted to fill, then they weren't going to come back. And that's what happened. And so this is where the knowledge to action piece is super important. So the work I've been doing with the Human Early Learning Partnership, who, by the way, possesses a database that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world as far as vulnerability amongst our children. So we have the answers right here at UBC as to what's plaguing our society. Now we just have to get it into movement and mobilize it and get it out to the people that need it. And those people are this big. So that's what we're looking for. So I absolutely honor all of you. Thank you so much. Lugalam Kori, Nilgat, and my heart is full to be here with you. I got to work a little bit with during my Patient Voices work with a group called the Synergy Hub. And the idea of synergy is really very simple. Better together. Okay? I am now better because you have now entered my circle. My circle is now stronger because you have now entered my circle. It's all I really need. I don't need much else beyond that, because diversifying your circle is actually the secret to moving through life, because that's where you get your tools. And data does that. I've become a bit of a data nerd. I love data. But then you also just approach it the way Brené Brown stated it in her first video. What are stories anyway, besides data with the soul? So when you are going through your data, when you're moving through your pieces and looking at all this information that you're gathering, remember, it's just a story. It's just storytelling. That's all it is. Break that down into those really simple pieces, and then your next step will present itself to you. Okay. So it's been, I've been honored to moderate this panel, and we'll see how that works out. I love the fact that we're all online. Relational pieces have changed so much, but the beauty of that is relationship to all things is what Indigenous cultures do. So we're going to hopefully help out a lot with how this relational piece unfolds, because we're not getting away from it. Yeah, it's here. It's not going anywhere. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we're going to bring everybody up. And if I could ask Dr. Gabrielle Legault to join me on stage, please. Oh, is she on? Is everybody on? Am I the only one on stage? Cool. Okay. See, and this is how it happens. See, the beauty of it is this is me all worked up. So it's all good. Okay, Dr. Gabrielle Legault, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Assistant Professor, Indigenous Studies, Department of Community, Cultural, and Global Studies, Irving K. Barber Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, UBC Okanagan. Gabrielle Legault is a Métis scholar from Lac Pelletier, Saskatchewan Treaty 4 territory, and an assistant professor in Indigenous Studies at UBC Okanagan, who, once again, I get a little bit choked up because one of my best friends, Dr. Jessie Nyberg, was at UBCO, and I miss her so much. That's actually the seat I hold at the Human Early Learning Partnership. I hold on to Jessie's seat. It's not my seat. See, I get really emotional about when we get our elders in here. As director of the Indigenous Health Research Unit, Vancouver Coastal Health Research Institute, she leads and supports research and prioritizes Indigenous self-determination in health and wellness. She is also the lead of the Urban Indigenous Wellbeing Collective, which hosts the annual Indigenous Wellbeing Gathering Conference in Kelowna. Her work focuses on dismantling colonial barriers in research and ensuring Indigenous communities define research priorities, methodologies, and outcomes. So thank you for joining us this morning. We're also joined online by Dr. Christopher Horsethief. He's a professor and postdoctoral researcher focusing on health policy and Indigenous community resilience. He has 30 years of field experience researching Tanaha linguistic and cultural systems, including the impact of colonization and potential resilience through education. His instructional experience includes Antioch University's and Union Institute and the university's doctoral programs, Gonzaga University's MBA, AIE, and UBC's IHALP programs, and an appointment as the Indigenous Scholar in Residence at the College of the Rockies. Christopher is a member of the Achiskanook First Nation. How was that, Christopher? All right. See? I also wanted to say something about the, I always have to point this out for the territorial acknowledgement. And as much as I love to be in this beautiful house, it's not new. All of us had to know whose house we were in at all times. And while we were there, honor the house we were from while we're in somebody else's house. So I always have to throw that out there. It's not new, it's old. So what we're going to do today is take a look at a few different themes around Indigenous-led health transformation in BC, centering Indigenous knowledge systems. I might just stay here on the mic, actually, because sitting down is not something, anybody that knows me, is not something that I do a lot of. So I might just stay here on the mic. And I'm going to direct some questions out to the panel. And there's a few pieces here. One of them that came up in our conversations around two-eyed seeing, and I really would like us to talk about that a little bit because there's different ideals and different visions around what that means. And I think it's really important to put that at the focus. It's the same thing when we talk about, do we want to learn about Indigenous culture? Well, you actually can't learn about Indigenous culture. Okay? You learn about Indigenous cultures. Because if we take the direction that if you lose language, you lose culture, there are 32 separate language groupings just in the current territory of British Columbia. That's just here, not including all the way across the base. So I would like us to really take a look at that. So if we can go ahead and if there's anything that the panelists would like to add to the introduction, we're all good, we're ready to go. The fireside chat has become huge. That's cool. Okay, so one of the things we're looking at as far as the question goes is what does it mean, so putting this out to the panel, what does it mean to put Indigenous knowledge into action in BC's current health context? And who would like to start with that? Okay. Dr. Legault?
Okay, I was volunteering, Christopher. Well, maybe just first to speak to the two-eyed seeing. It's something that it seems really prominent, that idea, particularly within health research, and it's sort of an emergent conversation, I would say, particularly within Indigenous studies. We're talking about the applicability of two-eyed seeing and in thinking about what are those two eyes, right? The idea of two-eyed seeing is that Indigenous knowledge systems coexist alongside Western knowledge systems, and they're both valid in their own right and can be taken together. That intent is really beautiful and wonderful, and I think that's why it gets taken up so often. However, which eye has been bigger for the last 200 years in the health system, right? So that I think that's the pushback is Indigenous knowledge systems have not been centered in the health system. So the pushback is maybe we need to look not at adding in Indigenous content or ideas in a way that can sometimes be very performative, but looking at it in a more meaningful way by actually centering and starting from Indigenous knowledge systems and then seeing how we go from there and where we go from there. So I think that was kind of our panel's discussion, and I'm sure Christopher will have thoughts to add to that. You know, within community contexts, it doesn't necessarily work to take that idea even of broad Indigenous knowledge systems, because all of our knowledge systems are very unique and different in their own right. So I think, you know, we need to be honest about the fact that Western knowledge systems already dominate our health systems and academic spaces. And so there is an urgent need for protection and for rebalancing in my mind. What is urgently needed, is intentional and sustained space for Indigenous knowledges to be centered. Not just as, an add-on, but recognized as legitimate, powerful, and capable of leading health system transformation for all peoples, because there are a lot of sort of foundational elements or principles, I think, that exist within Indigenous knowledge systems that apply to, things like respect, right? Relationality. I think a lot of those ideas will impact all peoples. So in my role as the director of the Indigenous Health Research Unit at BCHRI, or Vancouver Coastal Health Research Institute, I've had the opportunity to work directly with researchers, communities, and health leaders. And one of the clearest observations that I can say I've made, I started the job in August, was that Indigenous people are still rarely included in health research decision making. When they are, it's often in ways that are very constrained, either by funding models that only support temporary initiatives, or by institutional discomfort with challenging the status quo. So that discomfort has become extremely visible when it comes to Indigenous data. In some cases, what I'm seeing is entire data sets that include Indigenous participants are being simply set aside because people, maybe with really good intentions, don't want to do further harm, right? We understand that people have been harmed through health systems. However, this is a very valid concern, but avoiding this work, of doing this work in a good way with Indigenous peoples, means that they're erased from the research process altogether. And to me, that is doing equal, if not worse harm, right? And that erasure has very real impacts. So when Indigenous people are left out of research, our needs are not reflected in policies. Our health priorities are not addressed. And the systems that are supposed to serve us continue to fail us. So I think in thinking about bringing in Indigenous knowledge into health system transformation, we need to kind of start at looking at those sort of foundational things. Where are Indigenous peoples in the system? How are they represented? And are those knowledges that we're bringing to the system and our perspectives considered valid? So maybe I'll stop there and pass the question back over to Christopher. But I've lots more to say later.
Sure. Thank you. I was writing the question down because I have a long history of answering a question and then forgetting where it came from. So that was my pause there. I think first I should probably start by saying University of British Columbia, Okanagan, University of British Columbia. Hello, everyone. My name is Christopher the Steel Horses. I'm happy to be here again with the University of British Columbia, Okanagan, and University of British Columbia. I appreciate the opportunity to share some of these ideas with you. I'm going to take a similar approach. I'm going to talk a little bit about how my community looks at the idea of two-eyed seeing, and then talk about how we're integrating that knowledge into action. And I'll start like the old people would say, "Hey, pikakniks." They'd say, "Oh, a long time." The old people a long time ago. But now I look at myself on here and I look like one of those old people, because when I first started this work, I was like in my mid-20s, and now I'm in my mid-50s. But I remember people saying that this idea of two-eyed seeing is a little bit problematic in our community. We have a cultural theme in some of our ceremonies, particularly with some of our songs that have to do with an individual and kind of belongingness and connection to their community, to their family. That we don't have these dichotomies. We don't have two of something. And there's a specific reason for that. And the more we started talking about this, we said, hey, researchers in Western science are starting to be open to some of our ideas, and they call it two-eyed seeing. And right away, some of those old people started to close up, right? You can go through the physical stages of being engaged to not really knowing, to putting up a physical barrier between them and whoever's talking, and then checking out completely and being on their phone. And then one of my aunties, we know she's done when she starts clipping her nails in a meeting, because you can hear the nails ricocheting around. And so when we started to talk about that, they said, well, there's this idea about two things. And besides, how many languages are there just in British Columbia? And our moderator here mentioned that, 32. And then there's English, and then there's French, and then there's every other language from around the planet that was brought and transplanted here. So at that point, we're not talking about two-eyed seeing. We're talking about kind of equity and diversity and being able to allow everybody to get their data into the process without shearing away what's most important to them. Then we've got all kinds of eyes. So that's really the first thing. When the researchers that ended up still to this day, 8 years later, that have kind of taken this journey with us, when we told this to them, they said, oh, that's really amazing. That's not something that we've heard. How would we go about it? And so we started talking not about two eyes, but we started talking about which is this parity. It's this ability for two different groups or two different people or two organizations to do the exact same thing. So what we were talking about was knowledge holders, our systems that we've used to hold those things which are sacred to us, which define us and give us our strengths and our capacities through time and space and challenge. We want those to be just exactly as robust and as valid and institutional as what we're getting from the province or the federal government or whoever it is that's here doing research. Because 30 years ago, I sat in a little room in a log cabin and I watched biologists show up that wanted to rename or wanted to name novel species in Latin. And they did not say, how should we name these animals? They said, we're going to name them in Latin. We would like your input. And I remember those old people at the time were outraged by that. And these are people that I didn't see get upset like that very often. And they turned around and they pointed at a wall of 3-ring binders and they said, these are all species that were named in Latin. These were all research projects that happened without us. This is what happens when you bring research methodologies, epistemological frameworks, research methods, specific research questions to us without ever asking us what's important to us. We're desperately trying to save our critical language. So why are we naming these in Latin? He said, that's not even a language from the province. So that was the first time that we kind of got our foot in the door and we were able to tell people there's not this dichotomy. These are living, breathing knowledge systems. Yours, just as much as yours are built on literature reviews, so are ours. Ours just aren't always written down. We use citations just like you do, but in most cases, we will tell you who told us, why they told us, what the question was that led us to that. And what we found was a research team that was able to help to translate those ideas and make sure that everybody understands. We no longer take ideas in English and come here and ask our elders to translate them. We take ideas and we ask the elders, what's the important value and how can we convert English to fit that? And so to me, that's that parity. That's that motivating knowledge. That's that ability to try and refine things between those two very permeable boundary sets so that we can evolve together. We get an emergent phenomenon that's built on kind of cultural values, the cultural DNA of both groups, and not just one, and not just two eyes, where one eye is Western science and the other is this generalized pan-Indigenous, they all love nature kind of approach, but it's actually a very nuanced approach where those ideas that are very important to both groups are not shared.
I mean, yeah, thank you both. Didn't take long for the aunties to get into the conversation. That's always good. I'm always pretty happy when the matriarchs show up, and then we spend a lot of time talking about them. It's a really very important piece to understand. Okay, if we're just going from the vision of a colonial vision to the vision of a brown vision, that doesn't represent Indigenous cultures. Okay? When you hear me speak, I will consistently say, well, within my culture. Okay? When I started doing this work with Success by Six with the Human Learning Partnership, and I presented to a group of Indigenous people, and one of these elders showed up, and I love when the elders show up because you know you're going to get roasted, you know you're going to get hard questions. It's fantastic because they really are interested in this transfer of knowledge. And you know you're going to be challenged, and that's fantastic. We want to be that. We have to be okay with being uncomfortable, and we're not showing that as a society right now. So, so I did this, and this woman stood up, and she said, "You don't represent our children." And she was being defensive of her children. You can't fault her for that. And I said, "No, ma'am, I do not. But in order for this research group to approach and do research and collect data around your children and your families, yeah, we're going to make sure they come and talk to you first. They're going to have to go through us to get to them, because all of your children are my responsibility as a Gitanmaax person. Now, would you rather we weren't here or we were here?" See? I got a hug later on. It was good. It was good. It worked out. So that was really, thank you so much for that from both of you. That's really the piece I want people to think about as far as two-eyed seeing goes. When you are on somebody's traditional territory, find out how they see it, okay? This is the approach of being nation-based, okay? As I said, I will not represent another Indigenous culture. I will only represent mine. And only if I'm allowed to, which, you know, it's just about being taught these pieces. So I love the idea around transformation. You know, in Gitanmaax culture, we use arabis. If you just put your thumbs together, just hook your thumbs together like that, just like this, and just wave. And that's all you do. That's butterfly. Arabis, for us, represents your ability to be more than you currently are. Not better. You came into this world awesome. You're already awesome. Just more. It represents your ability to learn and transform at any given time in your life. Even up until the point where you make your journey, and possibly after, but my grandfather said, well, but nobody's come back and told us yet, so we don't know. You know, but that's really what we're looking for, is this transformational piece. When we start talking about where this can fit in, where Indigenous culture can fit in, I was asked this years ago, where do I believe Indigenous cultures can fit into this current society? I said, I don't know if it will. But how's the current process working? And is it working for all people? If it's not, then I would say it's not working. Okay, so when we start looking at the knowledge to action piece, the research to action piece, the mobilization piece, out to the panel once again, putting this question, what does it mean to put Indigenous knowledge into action in BC's current health context? And if we can maybe think about what we think health is being challenged with.
Well, I think I can address that a little bit. So when we first started doing this work around 2010, 2011, we started trying to find a way to make sure that the very last bits of cultural information that we had, these were from individuals that were raised by grandparents that were early 1900s, and their parents that I worked with were teaching using knowledge learned in the 1800s. So I'm now working with kind of my third, in some families, third generation of elders. And we started talking about some of the frustrations that their parents, their grandparents, and for some of them even their great-grandparents had when people would come to do impact analyses or deficit studies or pathologizing this or whatever. And they all knew, even though sometimes their grandparents who didn't have firm mastery of English, they couldn't explain why they were frustrated, but people knew. I'm frustrated because everything has to be translated. And they don't understand that it's a long process. And when I pause, I'm translating it from Krunacha into English before I can speak words, phrases that I'm unfamiliar with. And what happens is there are these awkward pauses, and what do Western researchers like to do? And there's an awkward pause. They fill that awkward pause with follow-up questions. They will move on. They will assume that the question that was asked doesn't have an answer. And when we started talking about why is it that we don't have more of our information in this process, people started to say that the mechanism by which we are taking or crowdsourcing what's familiar to us, that we are using that to move it into a research setting, the fundamental tool for the way that they're doing it is wrong. And so I said, oh, that's a great place to start. How should we do it? And they said, well, the group needs to think with one heart, and we've got to keep people from shutting down. And those were the two themes that would carry through for the next 15 years. Number one, the idea that for the first time our community was willing to talk about collective trauma, where the residential school, or St. Eugene's residential school, was the traumatogenic effect. And then for the follow-up generations, the Indian child welfare mechanism, the process by which children were removed from their families and disconnected from their nation, their families, their community, then in many ways disconnected from their self. People were willing to talk about that without shutting down. That was the most important. The second was, we need to stop sitting with one expert in front of people asking questions to a grid of people lined up. It's not the way we've solved problems from the beginning of time. When we think with one heart, uk means number one in our language. Ishui is our heart. The group has one heart. They're thinking with one heart. They're moving towards one direction. They started saying, it's just like any ceremony. We sit in a circle. We look at one another. We see body language. I can hear the tone of your voice. I know if you're being honest with me. I know if you're being dishonest with me. One person will ask a question, just like at our sweat house, just like at the big house, just like at the round house, just like any of those places. That person will humble themselves and say, hey, I have a question I don't have all the information for, and we've asked you all to be here today to crowdsource the optimal set of information. It's basic set theory. Curly bracket, what are all the pieces of information we need to solve this problem? And then there's a long list of ideas, whether we think of them as scripts or schema or ideas or stories or songs, however. And so that we just go around the room to the first person. Here's the question that I have. I can't figure this out on my own. I'm asking you for help. That person can do one of two things. I don't have anything to say about that. I need to think about it a little bit more. Or here's something that I think would help. In my family, we did it this way. Or my family did a little bit different than what you're talking about, and this is what we did. What they cannot do is tell someone they're wrong, that they don't belong, that they shouldn't be there, or that they're going to be removed from that group, because the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. They were invited to be there and contribute, so no one individual gets to tell them they don't get to be there. It's a property of the group, not of the individual. And you go around the room, just like when we sit in the sweat house and someone says, I had a bad dream, I'm here asking for help. Like when we go to the roundhouse or New Year's at our blacktail dance, where someone says, this is what I need for the upcoming year and I need all of your help. And we go around and we ask every person, give us that information. I won't rush you. I won't cut you off. I won't tell you you're wrong. I won't tell you that your perspective isn't valid. We go around that circle, and at the end, we've got this rich set of data that's not limited by small sample bias. We have to have a sufficiently diverse group of problem solvers. We've also got this ability to connect it to the literature, what my grandparents told me, what their grandparents told them. Now we're going back a century to this living, breathing data. And what we get is this amazing set of information where we get around to the end and they'll look right at that person and say, did you get what you need? And if they don't, or they have follow-up questions, we don't scold them, we don't get after them, we don't send them out, we go around again. We take that time to be able to do that. So when we started bringing research questions into that format, we were able to get all kinds of amazing data. What does it mean when a community member says so-and-so? There's all of these cultural values that we didn't have really a grid or a matrix to match them up. What does this word mean? Oh, it's interesting, when we asked you this question, you responded in a particular way, which we didn't quite understand. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? So it's an iterative process. It belongs to the group. It has to be a sufficiently diverse group of problem solvers. And that's an idea that we've ported From that research project all the way up to our nation census, where we have like a 20-page instrument with all kinds of rich data on all kinds of ideas. And we've built off of this idea that you give people the time to answer, you ask them questions, you show that it was by our community, for our community, that our census takers are nation members, and that our analysts are from the community, and we're not removing this away. We will have people from our community that translate this, that put it into the context that it needs to be. We'll make sure that those educated and, where we can, educated community members are moving that information into these current processes, what's happening into the research industry in general, or into other realms where it's most knowledgeable. And what we've found is that tendency to shut down, because we have that collective trauma chip on our shoulder, goes away. And people are willing to stay in the conversation a little bit longer. Their affective filters haven't popped up and blocked out the questions and their answers. They're willing to understand this is the tool we've been using since the beginning of time. It was good enough for my parents, my grandparents, their grandparents, dating back millennia. And it gives people the ability to say, I may be upset, I may be having a hard time, but I'm doing what we've done since the beginning of time. And I feel like I'm connected to the community. And this is a way of getting back to reconnecting them to family, community, to themselves, and all of those resources. So that's how we're kind of approaching that situation.
Dr. Legault?
In there? Wow, how do I follow that? I think like what I'm hearing in what Christopher is sharing here is, you know, to move research to action in today's context, in thinking of Indigenous knowledges or the community-specific challenges that we are wanting to address and the community-specific solutions that we're wanting to address, is we need to see a shift in practice, right? I think that that's a critical part of what he's talking about. It's a research methodology, and it's a research methodology that doesn't necessarily come from an academic space, but those of us who are working in Indigenous spaces we can translate it for you. We can tell you that, you know, relational processes of inviting your friends and family to a gathering is snowball sampling if you want us to, or that these are other, you know, we can make them valid from a Western lens if needed. However, we'd just really love not to. It's kind of exhausting and slows the work down for us that we're trying to do within community. But I think, you know, a lot of what we're talking about is a fundamental shift from, you know, extractive project-based engagement to what's a really relationship-based, reciprocal, community-driven types of collaborations, where you've built the trust to bring people into those circles who want to share and want to do a second round because they're comfortable with the process and want to come back and answer the question. And so I think if you're wanting to bring knowledge to action, you need the trust to start with that knowledge, to be able to bring that knowledge into the academy, into policy. And so I think, you know, shifting from this kind of partnership checkbox, or this idea that you have this one collaborator, a letter of support, a name on a grant, an advisory committee that might meet once a year, to, you know, a real partnership where you have that shared leadership and decision making in processes of knowledge gathering, but also, you know, as Christopher was alluding to, not just gathering the knowledge and having people from community being a part of the surveys, but also the analysis. That's been something that's been so critical in some of the community-based projects that I've been a part of, is that particularly communities that I am not a member of, I can't tell you the value of having people involved in the analysis to tell me when they're talking about harvesting, they're talking about fishing. Whereas in my context, I might have thought of, you know, deer hunting. And so when they're answering that in a survey, having that context specific analysis is critical to ensuring that the right knowledge is being translated into action and not just, my very specific lens. So I think changing that practice, changing that partnership, stepping back from the idea that we as researchers are the experts, folks that, the work we do affects the most are the experts. They are the people who have the expertise that we need to do meaningful research. So in practical terms, this can look like a number of things. This can look like co-developing projects with nations from the outset, involving Indigenous patient partners in projects to guide research design and implementation. It can, of course, involve advisory groups supporting in decision-making throughout projects and really ensuring that community priorities drive the work, not the other way around, that our priorities are driving the work. And so I think that there's a lot of things that Christopher shared that I think is so meaningful in thinking about that those types of projects or that approach to research that he described, bringing things into the circle, it serves many functions. It doesn't just get us answers to questions, as he described. It provides community belonging, community healing. It connects people to their relatives and to their communities when they're engaged in those types of ways. And we're here talking about health. Like, what do all of those things do for health? So I think the act of doing research in those types of ways and the process itself is beneficial for health, not just the outcomes. We're very outcome oriented within the academy and within research. So I think thinking more about, yes, those mechanisms and those tools, but the actual process itself and what benefits may emerge from the process and not just the end product. So I think those actions are something that should be ideally continual throughout a project, not something that we're saying, okay, we're going to find out the answer and then we can implement and then we can have actions, but something that can be sort of like this iterative thing where we're always building and doing better. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah. I think there's a ton of information there from both of our panelists. I kind of slid right past the Q&A. So I apologize for that because I did. I got I tend to get caught up in listening too, especially when I'm working with people from other nations, because once again, these are teachings that I have because I've been taught within my culture. If I could just say thank you so much to the panelists. Amazing amount of information. The ideas around humility and respect and relationship. Once again, these aren't really surprising words for us, but they aren't things that really existed here completely within the relationship that we're currently trying to reconcile, which is very difficult considering we're reconciling a relationship that has actually never existed. So that's tough. The other part of it too, though, is being relational peoples, having gone across Turtle Island and looked at different cultures and primarily found relational people, we're actually probably the best people to do it. So we're the best people to teach it. Do we have any questions online that we would like to address, or any on the floor? If you're waiting for about a 30-second answer, which none of us really have probably, I'm just saying, you know. Sir.
Who gets to generate the research focus and methodology? We've heard that suggestion there should be migrating to perhaps a different direction. So who gets to determine that in this research context?
Okay, so so the question from the floor is who gets to generate the research purpose? Focus.
And the methodology to do that within such a research community of UBC, and I'm here as a patient partner.
Oh, me as well, thank you.
Yeah, just really quickly, I'd like to say that I'm the chair of the Research Ethics Committee for the Gitxsan Nation Council, and when someone's going to do research, they submit a synopsis, and then we look at it. It's just like your institutional review, but we are looking for certain protections and compensation for people's time. I've worked on a number of large-scale data projects for Indigenous people, and they still, even a decade go, wanted people to take a day off of work to participate with no compensation. They wanted to give them an instrument designed from outside of the community. For us, if you're going to do research, there's just a few basic things. One, we want you to answer a few questions. We want to make sure you're compensating people for their time. But more importantly, we're normalizing that process. We are institutions, and we have institutional reviews, and ours is the Ktunaxa Research Ethics Committee. And if you give me a synopsis that already has your methodology, your epistemological framework, your research methods, and specific questions, we send it back to you saying, send us a request on what we would like to also include, because we won't go any further. And then once you make it to that point, we also ask you to identify a part of the Gitxsan Nation vision statement that you're including in your research. And that normalization process, as well as requiring external projects to look for Ktunaxa people that can be co-authors, or for Ktunaxa people that can lead the community engagement, normalizing those processes leads to long-term change and makes sure that those things that we've already pioneered in our community can be used to get the best information to you.
Dr. Legault, anything to add?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of like ideals, right? What would be ideal? Absolutely, it would be ideal for the research purpose and focus to be emergent from community and have something that is like really developed and led by community. I think that's the ultimate goal in developing our varying research capacity. And do things in our ways and our methodologies. However, I think we need room for gray area as well, because I think that often what I will see anyway from the health authority is there are researchers doing really innovative projects that will have profound impacts, particularly in rural and remote communities. And they may not have a pre-existing relationship with those communities. And so it's very difficult to bridge that gap sometimes. However, I think you don't know if a community is interested until you actually build a relationship with them to know. So I think that part is also really critical. So if you have, brilliant ideas and, are open to the community feedback that you will likely receive, or to going through community ethics boards processes, as many nations have specific processes, that I think that shouldn't stop you. Like, that's what I would hate to see, and that's what I am seeing a lot within the health authority, is it feels like an extra hoop to jump for folks, but it's a critical process that you engage in. And I think, as you described, coming with humility and a willingness to learn to do things maybe a little bit differently than you've been trained, and an openness, it can only lead to greater benefit. So yeah, I think it's a bit of everybody can have a say.
Perfect. Thank you. We're coming down to the end of our time together. I'd like to thank the panelists for joining us today. Please, everybody.
Marcy, thank you so much.
So really quickly, just a few points here. Like, we're talking about humility. Once again, humility is your ability to get out of your own way. Okay, it's actually the seat of your growth. When we start talking about, when we brought the example of somebody actually standing up to ask the question. If you see this a lot, we'll watch this a lot, people won't stand up to ask the question because they don't want to appear unintelligent. Okay, so I generally put my hand up and say, yeah, could you explain that to me like I'm a 7-year-old, please? Thank you. See, because my belief too is that the language of academia should only exist and operate within circles of academics. It shouldn't operate any place outside of that, because all those people outside this room are not in that place. Everybody has the ability to comprehend everything that you have to say if you're simply willing to say it in a language that they will understand, right? They're fully comprehensive, they can do that. The other things are around respect, where within a product and quantity-based culture, that's what I believe North America is, respect is a commodity. Okay, it's an earned thing. Yeah, within Gitanmaax culture, the only thing you have to do to receive my respect is enter my circle, because you have lived a life, and life is work. And you've done the work, and I honor the work that you've done. So you don't earn anything from me. In fact, you actually don't even have to return it to continue to get it, because what somebody else does with their respect does not determine what I do with mine. Okay, I do that. That's mine. Okay, the other part is outcome-based pieces. The journey, the destination has one outcome. The journey has limitless possibilities. The learning all happens before the equal sign. That's where all the learning happens. After the equal sign, you've got the product. So I invite you to embrace humility, to step into spaces where you are uncomfortable. And the best way to do that is to have somebody with you. And I'll go. I got no problem with that. I'm stepping into places all the time just because I want to know what's going on over there. It's all about language. Once you start doing this, you start thinking this is all about language and how things are used. You have 20,000 years of being whole and healthy to pull from. That's what we offer you, compared to 250 years of now struggling with all the things that were named in the opening. So I invite you to reach out to us. Somebody told me once that it's tragic that we're still having these conversations. It's triumphant that we're still having these conversations. It would be tragic if we are no longer having these conversations. Okay? I thank you all. Amiya, panelists, Amiya, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, please.
So for those of us in the room, I want to say thanks to Dr. Legault for being on the panel with it as well. And thanks to the panel as well. There's a very short break. So it's scheduled to start in just a few minutes, the next session. So just after at 10:20. There will be a session in here that's being virtual, Advancing Digital Resilience in Youth. And within the Skeena Room, Embracing Agency to Bridge the Knowledge to Action Gap. The Skeena Room is just outside that direction across the Commons, which is the big grassy area. And you'll see wayfinding that you can walk on the beautiful outside down to where the next area is called the Skeena Building, just down on the left-hand side there as well. Those are where the breakout sessions will be at that time as well. Do note that the questions are difficult to get in the room. I'm sorry that we didn't get to them here. And so use Slido for your questions. The moderators will use them and pick them up. So through the daytime, use Slido and it'll be translated in both sites as well. Enjoy your very quick break and we'll see you at the next session.